Hello, welcome back everybody to End Zone to End Zone, our podcast for the marching arts from Synced Up Designs. We're glad to be back. Dan Twiford here and
Shane Gwaltney.
We're excited to be back with you everybody. So here we find ourselves in the thick of marching band season. Most everybody are through camp. Some people only have a month left, some 2, but we are definitely in the thick of it. So what we want to talk about today on the podcast is marching band rehearsal techniques, how to actually get things looking and sounding in a way that are going to make the members feel good about what they're doing, the staff, and everything feel like it's an efficient moving machine. Because I think with all the pressures of high school life or middle school, whatever your program is, with all the different during the day teaching elements you have to put yourself through, and then this is your evening rehearsals, your weekend rehearsals, it can feel like I have so much to do in so little time. So we're going to try and make that a little more organized for you. We're going to try and give you some things to focus in on. Maybe even just by hearing us give you a reminder, you'll think, oh, I need to do that with my group, or I need to reevaluate how I'm looking at that topic. So I'm excited to get into some of these things, and it really will cover everything from broad to specific, I think, today.
Yeah, let's get into it.
So the first thing we wanted to talk about is establishing a rehearsal etiquette and expectations. So if you're going to all get together, it should be done in an orderly fashion. And if you don't need to spend the first 20 minutes of rehearsal talking about where to put water bottles, what time to be at what field, where to look to find the plan, all that kind of stuff, you need to build yourself some infrastructure, right?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is for people to create consistency. So when the members know that when they get out of school at whatever time, o'clock, that they've got 15 minutes to do whatever, and then they're at the field for body warm up or whatever that is. And for me, just having that level of consistency and expectation takes the herding cats element out of it, where every day is like kind of a new day and trying to figure it out. And then, of course, being able to set up meetings at the beginning of rehearsals that either the staff meet at the end zone to chat about the daily goals. Maybe there's a text message that goes out to the staff members that shows the daily schedule that's going on. Maybe there's something on the whiteboard in the band room that shows the members, like the phrase of the day, here's what we're working on. So there's lots of those things that can be set up preemptively before you even get into rehearsal to help students with the mindset before they walk in. Is like, okay, what's next? I know I'm supposed to be sweating for the next 3 hours out here, but what are we really doing? And I think having the information up front before they even start, even before we even talk about etiquette, I think really helps sets the tone for what's expected. But when you're talking about etiquette, we've all seen different versions, right? We've all marched different versions. Sometimes it's an attraction to go march somewhere because they rehearse a certain way that might fit your personality or what you want to do. But in high school, you have to have certain types of rehearsal etiquette set up just so that it doesn't feel like we're herding cats a lot. And it takes a lot of the question out of the membership, and they kind of know what to expect and what's going on. And yeah, I know I've experienced a lot of different ways. What are some things that you've experienced as far as members or teaching?
Sure. I mean, as far as like structuring rehearsal, having some kind of familiarity to that is really helpful if you're going to start with a body block. And then, maybe you have to check on the whiteboard when you're coming through the band room what that middle meat of the rehearsal is going to be. But maybe we always finish the same way. Maybe the last 15 minutes is always the same kind of thing. Because it's important to get the kids out on time, right? The parents have an expectation that you need to meet too, right, for the end of it. But in the etiquette of how things are done, there should be staff members who know that they're going to lead a certain section. There should be section leaders who know that they're going to be getting their count on all their members and making sure that we're all here, we're all ready to do what we need to do, right? They need to kind of be the little lieutenant in the middle, making sure everything runs efficiently. But setting those expectations, having a flow to rehearsal, I think is a major benefit, helps keep everything else calm, and you can focus on the meat of what you're trying to get to.
Right, and when you're talking about etiquette, also, you're talking, do I talk at the end of every rep? The answer is no. You're going to wait on a staff member to do something. You don't need to turn to your buddy and say, hey, you missed that, knowing that you missed something too, probably in that aspect. I think creating a general self-awareness, focus, and process with individuals, I think is really good. I think being self-aware is a hard thing to do as you're growing up, and I think the more you can instill that into members as they're going, meaning self-aware is like, did I hit my dot? Did I play the right dynamics? Did I cover down and do the right thing that I needed to do while I was marching?
Right.
Did I hit my dot? Was I 2 steps off? Can I analyze, okay, I need to take a bigger step next time? Like those type things, the more you can instill into your students, the easier your rehearsal is going to go, because it's the whole thing. You want to teach somebody to fish versus handing them a fish, right? So if you're constantly telling them, oh, you missed that dot, you got to do X, Y, and you're thinking for them, then that you'll never get as good as you want to be. So you want to kind of explain those situations and help them have a little bit of forethought and accountability to why they made the mistake. And then maybe the next time, hey, you touched that hot stove, but this next time, let's have some forethought about it. So now you're not going to do that. You're going to take that extra step out of the gate with a little more oomph, so your first step looks good, and you can make that dot, and most importantly, like teach members to do something different next time if they mess up. Like throw that spaghetti against the wall, overshoot that dot you've been undershooting, so you can make it, and then back off a little bit so that you can hit it up. So I think all of that goes into just being able to teach your students that type of etiquette and personal responsibility. And most importantly, to not get in the way of the staff members, and to trust what they're doing, what they're going to give you. The information is going to be correct. And even if it's not correct, do what they ask you to do, just because they're trying to shape and mold a product. And you may not know as a member what the envision really truly needs to be, and you just got to be a little submissive to that and make sure that you're being a part of the process and not hindering it.
Right.
Is kind of a big thing. But
so when you're first coming into this, I'm reflecting now from you saying this, when you first come into band, there's not a lot. First of all, you're going to be told you're not going to talk a lot, right? For these 3 or 4 hours, like you're not going to say a whole lot of words. But you want to take someone who's just a normal kid coming to do an extracurricular activity and turn them into a quiet, critical thinking, moldable piece of clay athlete, all those things. So you have to charge them up to that point and show them where the value is in that. And, some of that is keeping them engaged. You don't want the computer to go asleep. Because when you have the whole band field out there with hundreds of kids maybe out there, or dozens or whatever you've got, but you're going to have to give specific attention to 1 or 2 kids at a time sometimes. And then what are all the rest of them doing? And, if we've done our job right, they're critical thinking. They're digging into their own responsibilities. They're thinking about their next rep, their last rep. How can they do a better job? But if you haven't set them up with that training and why that's valuable, the computer just goes to sleep and they're just waiting for, okay, reset. So if you can succeed at this topic of setting expectations and getting a rehearsal etiquette established, you're going to turn them from unengaged, waiting to be talked to, into here's why there's value in what you're going to get out of this, and get them to be a critical thinker, moldable piece of clay for the staff to work with, who trusts the process and all that. But some of that has to come from trying and failing and getting a little bit better and saying, see, great job, and then let's watch the trombones do it. Wow, see how strong they look when they do that. Now your section. Wow, that looks great. Now when everybody does that, look at the big result. So someone in the first week in the door, they don't get that. They have to go a little bit out and trust you a little bit. But I think that's a really good thing to shoot for, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Being able to provide that kind of information to everybody so that they can thrive on their own is never a bad thing, And when you're talking about culture, over time, once you have done all your trial and error and you figure out what works with your band and your students, because let's be real, it's different for everybody. You can't plug in what one band's doing down the street to your band without some kind of massaging, right? Nothing's really as plug and play as you think it is at these clinics that everybody goes to. Like, there's always a little bit of malleability to how you implement it into your own process in your program. But ultimately, once you figure that out and you stick with it, then you really got to wait almost 4 years before it goes through all the generations. And then now your juniors and seniors are implementing that for you. And then you're able to, run the band in an efficient way. But I think finding that culture of etiquette, I think, is the most important thing for your band, because it's going to be different from everybody.
Right. So yeah, adjust to who you have and what the goals you have, and hopefully those are some good tips for you to take on how to be efficient in your communications and setting up a little structure, and make sure you have a structure and have expectations. And the very first thing you start with, writing on the board today what the plan is, even just that implies that you've done some forethought before that day to get the plan together, to know what you're going to talk to the staff about in that 10-minute huddle before everyone breaks, et cetera. So
right,
set yourself up.
Yep. And as we move into the next thing, we can kind of talk about communication, right? Because communication is going to be part of that etiquette. And, I mentioned it earlier, you meet in your end zone, you post it on the whiteboard of the band room, like whatever that's needed, you have to be able to start with that. Now, talk about some of the maybe softwares or programs that we use to communicate in the groups that we've done. And maybe, I'm sure a lot of bands use those type of things, but I also know that some things you can't use in a high school situation because of security and that kind of stuff. So,
yeah.
But talk about some of those.
So, an independent organization with older members, like what we've done at Mystique, there are GroupMe or, other Slack, that kind of thing where you can do messaging to everybody. You want to have some version of that so that you can communicate with your whole ensemble.
Facebook groups is a good way, like private, right, where the public can't see it, that kind of thing.
Now, obviously for, high school age, you're not going to be on social media with your kids, but I know there are platforms that have a built-in safe way to communicate that's, through the school and everything. But having one of those that's to everybody, you need to be able to let everybody know something, and to all the parents, whether
instantaneously.
Correct.
Because not everybody checks their emails.
That's right.
So whatever we can do to get that message on the phone in your pocket.
Right.
Is kind of where it's at.
So I think, on communication, one place that journey starts is the end of a given rehearsal. Because at the end of rehearsal, somebody needs to take account for what we all just experienced. How far did we get? You have to meet with your key staff members, meet with your section leaders who were running a subsection on the other field, and kind of see how far did we get. Because inevitably that leads to making the plan for next time. So number one, maybe your first meeting is wrap up communications about the rehearsal you just did. Then you need to kind of talk from top down in your organization and make sure that everyone from show designers and creatives, higher level people are happy with the overall progress of your project. I know that's a role that you've been super familiar with and involved in especially, like a Mystique where you're the top of the pyramid, helping to determine direction for how we're going down the field, but then all the way down through who's in charge of each section, who's going to be in charge of the next rehearsal planning.
Right. And I think one of the big things is setting up the rehearsal, making sure that everybody knows what's going on. Because it's nothing worse than being in a rehearsal, being like, well, what's next? And you're waiting the information from the box. But if you already know, hey, we're getting ready to work on the snare feature next, then everybody knows. You're just kind of waiting for the next thing to kind of wrap up and kind of get your head wrapped into the next thing. But ultimately, you'll want to also decide what type of rehearsal is it. Is it a production rehearsal? Are we trying to align certain effects? Are we trying to get that rifle toss to match that snare shot at the end of something? Are we trying to get the horn release matched with a cymbal choke? Like those type big effect things that need to happen with everybody on the field or in the room, like that needs to be like a checklist in rehearsal of like, these are the things that we want to work on. And they may take a little longer because we're involving everybody and not just a small section, right?
Right.
Or maybe your rehearsal is, hey, you know what, we're going to clean today, and that's all we're doing. We're not going to do big production runs. We have to make sure this woodwind feature matches with the With the keyboards, we have to make sure that the snare part matches with some kind of tuba. So whatever it is, we're cleaning things. We're breaking rhythms down from back to front on the field. We're isolating voicing sections on the field that match.
Yeah.
Like all those things you want to be able to have mapped down. And maybe you already have a grid or a spreadsheet of instrumentation that matches a certain spot on the field that you already know you're going to rehearse at least once a week.
Yep.
So there's already those problem spots that you already identified from the music and the drill, just rehearsal, that you know, hey, these things got to be hit once a week. These things can be hit once every 2 weeks. These things can be hit whatever. Or, hey, this thing is hit every day in rehearsal because it's just hard.
So well, I think we should come back around to strategy and talk a little bit more about that in depth.
Yeah.
But here in this communication, where we're talking about just what needs to be the law of the rehearsal, the process, the biggest thing of all that you said is everyone needs to know the plan, staff members, so that it's not horses running in different directions with different objectives, right? When we unify, we're way more powerful and we can actually chip away at our show. And like you said, some things take repeated effort. It's not just like a rehearsal. But
and both of those things, a production rehearsal versus a cleaning rehearsal, in my opinion, requires different staff involvement on the field. In a production rehearsal, the staff might be sitting in the stands taking notes about the stuff they need to clean in their next sectional or whatever. But an ensemble where we are cleaning something, the staff might be more engaged on the field and working directly with the person in the box. Those two different dynamics are definitely different. And I think if the staff understood that when they're on the field, so A, they're not in the way, or B, they're helpful.
Let me give you 3 scenarios, and I think these are kind of like tiered, differentiated scenarios. And just tell me real quick what you think the, quick version of staff roles would be. So scenario 1 is our band has trouble with stamina, and I just know that they're having trouble getting through a certain movement, the breathing, just being able to do it. It's new, they're weak yet, they need to get some more strength. All right, that's number 1, is we just need to get stronger this rehearsal because it's all new stuff. Number 2 is a cleaning rehearsal. They have it on the field. There's just different people with different interpretations. We need to get X's and O's aligned. And number 3, production rehearsal, vertical moments, focus, etc. So what's the difference in the staff between those 3?
Yeah, so the first one
was just like strength and stamina rehearsal.
Yeah, strength and stamina. I mean, to me, that's in sectionals tracking block, going past the limit of what you need to do in a rehearsal, because we're all training athletes in some shape, form, or fashion, right? And as an athlete, you have to train past what your threshold of expectance is, right? And or what's expected, and you have to make sure that you can do that at a consistent level. Because if you can, if you're trying to train for a 5K and you run 10K every week, that 5K is going to be super easy, right? So the problem is a lot of these band kids don't really, they don't have the couch to 5K scenario, right? So we have to kind of walk them through that and ultimately train them in the skills that we are going to need them to do on the field. So we don't want them out there lifting weights. Who cares?
No, right.
We have to train the muscles that they're going to be using, which is their lungs, their stamina, their endurance, and that kind of thing. Of course, the muscles they need to hold their horns up and stuff like that.
But it's hard to do the second kind of rehearsal where you're trying to get repeated, clean results when they don't even have the aptitude.
Right, and that's what I mean. I think you have to have strength to be able to even make adjustments to comments, because the members are going to be intelligent, but if they can't coordinate and decipher the information that you're giving them and their body physically can't do it, it's irrelevant. Like, you have to get them to a point where they can engage with your comments and be able to, shape the idea of what you're trying to get them to.
Reflect. And
yeah, because otherwise they're struggling and they leave every day. It's like, man, today really sucked. I don't like band anymore.
Sure.
And that happens because everybody's going to meet their point where, like, man, I just got my butt whooped today. And maybe I don't want to go back the next day. But the point is, you want to get them to the point where they're thriving.
Right.
And you're going to sweat. Let's just get over that. Like, band is hard. You're going to sweat. And
if you do it right, the next day's easier than the last day.
It will always be that way.
Yeah.
And just to be able to get past that into the next thing, I think requires a little bit of stamina and a little bit of people finding themselves and understanding that the staff knows where their limit is and they're going to take you past where you think you can go because that's their job,
Right.
Yeah. And, yeah. And what was the next scenario?
All right. The next scenario was, all right, so it's not just about endurance. We're just cleaning. We actually need to clean
staff on the
show.
field.
Right. Staff on the field.
Staff on the field. To me, it's the staff and the person in the box need to understand the process the person in the box wants to do, because there's many ways to skin a cat, right? And we want to make sure that everybody's aligned with that process that we're doing from up top, so that the members on the ground or the staff members on the ground don't deviate from the objective up top. And most importantly, make sure your comments are the keep it simple, stupid method, right? Which is, in our terms, is I like to keep it, you're too fast, you're too slow, you're too loud, you're too soft. Keep everything in those 4 realms, and then keep your sentences and explanations short, and try not to pontificate on everything. Yep. And just move quick, you know. And to me, I think that's where you get the most efficiency out of people, is just keeping it short and sweet.
And the same thing if it were a visual rehearsal, which should be stated, are we cleaning visual or are we cleaning music? What's the focus?
It's all the above.
Right. But we don't want the clarinet tech fixing visual while they fix,
Sure,
like if it's not, like let's
keep the focused.
Have some direction. Right. Exactly. And you want to be able to bank those wins. And I think what you said at the beginning is like the biggest takeaway of this whole thing is teach a man to fish. You want to get these kids to own the recipe themselves and be able to. It's not just like, oh, you brought me a dish. It's they got to own the recipe and be able to create it. Even if you got sick and couldn't show up, they should be able to do the thing. The third scenario was a full ensemble vertical moment focus rehearsal.
Vertical moment as in music or visual, or just
like a full production rehearsal, like you're up top, you're in the judge's seat.
Yeah. I think that is where the scenario lies, where the staff members are on the sidelines or in the stands watching, taking notes, because, like anybody, when you see something from a 30,000 foot view, you're going to see way more problems than when you're standing in front of 5 people, right? So take it back to what a judge sees. So a field judge, their job is to make sure they can analyze 3 to 5 people at once, and they're listening for, unified technique. They're looking at feet and time, but they're taking small samplings. They're not looking at everybody from that point of view. So as a staff person, you need to put yourself in those positions and think, okay, I'm in the stands now. I'm watching a production rehearsal. I can see these lines not lining up. I can see the flags not hitting at the same time. There's a big, gong and bass drum hit. The things that should be lining up, and you can take those notes, but then when you get in on the field, you can then micromanage the 3 to 5 people and apply the information that you're looking up from up top, and then really hone in and fix some things. But sometimes you don't know those problems exist until you sit up top, and I think giving the staff that extra piece of opportunity to sit in the stands or sit in the band tower where everybody's rehearsing and be able to see what they're looking at, and then come in the next rehearsal like way better informed than if they spent 10 rehearsals on the field.
So this is a staff management thing, though, that I think needs to be mentioned, because I can't tell you how many bands I've seen it goes to the production rehearsal, and obviously there's going to be less voices. You got the person in the tower or at the top box who's running things, and then a lot of times you see staff members who just are not engaged anymore because it's not their teaching time like that.
It's other teaching time, so they're on the field and they're just waiting instead of just getting in the stands.
Either waiting to talk, or if they're in the stands, not paying attention, not getting the bigger picture. And I think if you're the person in the box who has those priorities in mind, it is valuable to get with your staff and talk about them, right? Talk about, like, it's so easy if you're the guy chasing the drum line around. If it were up to you, you would have spent that whole rehearsal talking about this thing that they're playing back there that nobody's even listening to, compared to what the focus of the moment is. So there's two strategies that I think you have to have in your pocket.
Seeing what's important or not important.
Right. Number one, you should have a plan and a roadmap of your whole show of what you think the value of for a viewer, whether you're a judge or just an audience member, what is the main thing that I should be watching? Where's my attention? What's the big payoff moment that I need to make sure I'm caching, right? And then number 2 is you should be able to watch your show with an open mind and look for things that stand out as, stinkers. Like, oh man, I was trying to get the value over here, but gosh, I cannot help but notice the flags doing this over here, or I cannot help but hear...
In a bad way.
In a bad way.
Right, yeah.
I can't, that intonation down there is taking me out of the moment, or the, ride cymbal on the drum set player is just...
It's too loud.
Yeah, too loud every single time. Right? All the way.
Yeah.
DCI and all.
Yeah. Yeah.
But really, so I think having both of those things in a production rehearsal, 1 is your roadmap of what you think ought to be important, and 2, just an open mind from an audience standpoint of just like what is going to take my attention, whether or not I meant it to. Like, that's taking my attention over there. I need to clean that up, get rid of it,
and the one thing that's not lost on me is that, like, there's going to be people that are watching this is like, staff? What do you mean staff? I'm the only band director here.
Yes.
And we understand that that's a luxury item for some groups. But what are some things that maybe that a single band director that's running some things, like what are some topics that they could do to help?
Sure. No, absolutely. I think you want to... It still is the same goal. Give the kids the recipe and ownership over the recipe as fast as possible. Ways that you can do that. Familiarize them with their music even more. Because I know I spent a long time in my journey as a player with just me and my one line of music, and that's all that matters to me is, did I do good on my line of music, versus understanding the whole picture. So I think if you have a recording of the song that you're playing already have been played by another group that's maybe way better than your group, if it's a drum corps thing, if it's, whatever you're getting your music from, an orchestra, they need to listen to that. They need to understand, because as soon as they have that picture in their head of, oh, that run goes with this attitude, they'll understand what they're shooting for so much faster. So I think if you're at a lack of staff...
Monkey see, monkey do, man.
Yes, right. So that is a big one, is, the more you can get them to be an engaged, informed owner of the literature that they're playing. I think that was way underdone in my journey for a long time. So I just want to...
Yeah, I for sure. That's really good. I think the big one that hits for me is don't bite off more than you can chew. If you're a one-person show, if you're just the only band director that has staff come in like once a week or just weekend camps, you really need to consider the type of material, the drill, your production, like what you're trying to do, and then figure out if you got the resources to do that. And if not, you need to tone it down so that you can be successful at whatever you're doing. I don't think it's important for kids to feel like they're doing the hardest thing out there. I think it's important for them to be successful at whatever they're doing, because the layman can watch the smallest or biggest band and realize quality.
Right.
It doesn't mean anything. So, I think just being able to put your resources into doing something that's great.
You could do the Farmer in the Dell and play in tune and play rhythms together and be really impressive.
Absolutely.
I don't know if the kids would connect to that show, but
probably not.
Pick something the kids would connect to.
But
I'm just
some
saying,
overalls they could wear. It'd be fine.
Simple is not bad.
Oh, absolutely not.
Intonation out, rhythms out.
All that other
that's
stuff.
bad. Feet out of time. That's bad.
So you don't want to compound the bad.
Right.
You don't want to do all that.
And any audience member who hears the band who's not biting off what they, or chewing what they bit off, any audience member who hears that wishes they made the different choices, so
right, but
set them up.
The other thing is, if you have a small band, maybe you lean on your student leadership a lot more than, say, a band with, a dozen staff members.
Yeah.
And that leadership, maybe you do have meetings with them, trusted meetings that you have in the end zone instead of staff members, and hey guys, here's what we're doing today. This section, I want you guys to make sure everybody in your sections has their mouth on the horns at least and playing, just things like that you can empower student leadership to do, but nothing to where they feel like they're critiquing the members. You never want to put them in a position to where they're having to do that or critiquing their peers.
Sure.
On that end, but I think empowering them, I think will help
If you can set them up with like, some plans for sectionals, maybe you've got, the hour or two after school or, some designated chunk of time that it's a different section rotating through, and you can kind of keep an eye on sectionals and be a part of that process, but kind of maybe help have student leaders and a combination of you floating in and out. Like maybe that's the best you can do staff-wise, personnel-wise.
Yeah,
but
and so while we're on this like one band director show thing, maybe you set your rehearsal schedule up so that you have every day is a specific section that you're doing and working on, maybe on the field with music, doing whatever, and then 1 or 2 days a week you're doing full ensemble. It might require you as a band director to do more days after school, but that would give you more like alone time with every section, so everything gets detailed as you want it to be.
Yeah.
And then you'd have like your ensembles on Thursdays or something like that where you put everything together. So there are ways to do it. You just have to really think about how you're applying that. Or your band room might be big enough to put down, 20 yards, 30 yards worth of, yard lines in your band room. And then now you can do small sectionals and stuff in there during class time without having to go out. Because let's be real, you may have band during your class time, but now you're eating up time walking to the field, walking back. It's where can you get some of that time back? And if you have a band room that's big enough to even put down 15 yards, 20 yards, then you're moving in the right direction, I think, to manage your time a little bit better.
Sure. So. And I think with less staff, you need more efficiency, obviously, of what you're doing. So honing your technique and warm-up program to match your show. If there's a segment that you're having trouble with in your show that could translate into a warm-up, you should do that. Try and get more minutes playing that material so that they can be more successful. And, instead of doing more general things, like you mentioned, you go to a clinic, you hear, oh, this is a good visual warm-up, and you're spending 25 minutes doing that cool visual warm-up you learned at that camp, instead of, like, maybe I could figure out a warm-up that involves these 3 pages of drill sets, and figure out how to do that. It can be done. Think creatively.
Yep. And, as we're getting out of the communication thing, and the next step to me is how to determine the difference between ensemble rehearsals versus sectional rehearsals. And that's a little bit about what we're talking about on the field as far as like, is this a visual ensemble rehearsal? Is it music? Is it full production? Are we cleaning? And too often that sometimes happens is say too often, and sometimes that even work together. I don't know, probably not. It doesn't matter. It's all, we're not going to edit it because it's real.
Right.
It is what it is. So, word salad. It's my favorite lunch sometimes. But what I would like to do is talk about the sectional and full ensemble purposes, which is in sectionals, you want to make sure that you're doing the cleaning. You can go out there with smaller groups. You can go on the field and hyper focus on smaller segments. But when you get into a full ensemble setting, you don't want to continue that sectional mentality, right? You want to make sure that you're bigger group focused, you're focusing on things that the whole group needs to know, which is, again, a lot of times production type things where people need to understand how effects line up with something else that may not be in their section. So maybe there's a tuba thing that lines up with, a guard phrase that maybe there's a melody that needs to line up that they need to coordinate that with, and maybe the guard just needs to hear it a little more times live versus on an audio recording, and where they're standing on the field and what it sounds like to them, because that's way different when you're rehearsing guard and they got the jam box in the front of the field and everybody's hearing it versus you standing in the back corner on the 20 and hearing that phrase. Like, it's different. So I think putting them in that performance element more often in a comfortable environment and a repeatable environment so they can fix their mistakes, get comfortable with it, yada, yada, yada. And of course, there's the shirt that we always like to wear, which is less talk, more reps. And there's a reason why we made that shirt. And it's because I think members want to do more reps. And not saying talking's bad, you need to talk and the staff needs to give information, but I think at some point they just need reps. And I think that's probably the most important thing out of all this discussion that we're talking about today is that we could talk about rehearsal etiquette, we could talk about process, we could talk about planning.
Yep.
All that doesn't matter if they don't get all the reps in the world at it. And a lot of times we might weigh our conversing to like 70% and feed them all the information, then they get 2 reps like, oh, that's good, all right, move on. And that is the worst, you know.
Right.
And as we're talking about that, one of the things that I don't like in any ensemble setting is at the end of an ensemble group of reps, whatever, the rep wasn't the best and we still move on. And that's painful. And you got something to say about it. But if it is bad and we need to move on, I think the members need to know, hey, that wasn't our best effort, but for time's sake, we're going to move on, not let that just live and breathe as the pinnacle ending rep,
Sure.
you know? And if you do have time, go back and redo it again so that you end with a better day.
Right.
You know?
And ideally, if you've done a good job of giving them the recipe and they knew what they were shooting for, they might understand what you're saying, right? Hey, we didn't quite get to awesome 16th notes we heard in the recording that we heard the trumpets give a really good version of. We didn't all perfectly line them up. We're doing good progress here. I can tell the effort out there. We need to move on for time. You know, like, talk about your benchmarks, talk about what you're shooting for, and, you know, make sure that everybody kind of knows where they are in that process.
Yeah, and really, no matter what environment you're in, whether it's sectionals or a full ensemble, the members probably need to hear this more than the staff, clearly, is the level of consistent output needs to be incredibly consistent. Because what happens is, and I'm going to use the drum line, for instance, because we only know one way to play. It may be dirty or whatever, but we're going to put the same amount of effort in every single time. And if you don't see our sticks moving, it's a pretty obvious thing that, hey, this kid's not playing, right? Where winds, it's a little different. They can kind of hide a little bit and pretend like they're playing, and they may not put out completely on a rep. And then now the band director is talking about balance, trying to get the percussion section balanced to it. Then they adjust in a rehearsal, let's balance them here. Then they go to a show, then all of a sudden the wind player's like, yeah, let's play now, it's a show. And then things are different with percussion, and it's... To me, as a percussionist, that is maddening at high school band rehearsals, and you can't really get what you need out of that in a full production setting unless every kid is doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing. And it's a little frustrating, but I understand that's just where things are at with high school band, but I really wish that every band member in high school really understand the importance of their role on the field.
Sure.
You know.
Yeah, and you know, I think supporting them and
nobody's hiding. That's the thing.
Right.
If you're out there, you own that position. You are very important. You know, and you need to play, and you need to make sure you're doing all the right things because it affects decisions that the staff makes about bigger picture items, about your capability even do the choreo maybe or whatever. Maybe you're just lazy that day, but you know you can really do it.
Right.
So the staff dumbs it down or waters it down skill level, and then you're bored because they saw that you weren't really into it and couldn't do it. You know, so there's a little bit of autonomy, I guess, between both members and staff when it comes to that type of stuff. You want to show them what you can do. Yeah. Because they want to be able to give you the best, you know, for your experience and the band's experience.
Right. Well, try not to let them hide too. You know, there's nothing wrong with hearing second and third trumpets only on this rep.
That's when you're in a rehearsal situation and you want to identify those things. That's cool. That's what it should be, but not when it's like, all right, band, let's hear you. All right, we need to hear more people. Oh, Susie, you need to make sure you put the horn on your mouth this time. You know, it's that kind of stuff that can be a little maddening. But you know, you just got to get through it. I like to talk about the techniques that are used for each skill level of band. Too often we might go to a Music for All clinic, or we just aged out a drum corps, or we went and saw something really phenomenal and we want to implement it into our band situation. A lot of times that information that's being implemented isn't really taken into account the situation that it's being implemented into. And a lot of times those bands that maybe showing you, or you got the clinic information from, their resources are astronomical. Their band room is awesome with 20 practice rooms in it. They've had the same band director for 20 years that has this process in. So when you learn that type of information, please understand what it took to get there and take a look under the hood. And make sure you start there at the beginning of what that is and not at the end of what you heard. Because what's going to happen is some square peg in a round hole sometimes, right? You got to be able to understand where that's at. If you just aged out a drum corps and you know how you were taught at a drum corps situation and know how you reacted to certain things, don't take that one-trick pony into a high school situation, because you're not going to get anywhere with that. You got to be able to read the room. You got to be able to meet the members where they're at. You have to, get down on the ground a little bit and help, develop some more fundamentals so the information or the higher level information that you do want to give has something to stand on. Because too often I'll hear drum corps members, when they get back, they want to go teach, and they start using all this vocabulary and terminology, and the student is like, I have no idea what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Where it may be normal for them in their setting, but it's a completely different language in a different setting. So just people need to understand that when you're learning in different high-level environments, there's a culture, there's a vocab, there's situation that's way different. So just make sure that when you're plugging that energy, that experience that you've gotten from somewhere else into the next thing, that you put a little bit of yourself behind it and you analyze the situation and figure out how to get in where you fit in, because it's not all plug and play. It never is.
Sure. And did critical think about it a little bit. What is this exercise? What is this technique I'm trying to implement? What pyramid of skills does that exist in? And what's the foundational level of that? Because maybe we need to start at level 1.
Right, exactly. Like, I can't even talk about this thing I want to talk about because we can't even stand with our feet together. It's like, let's not even talk about the first step of the drill. Let's talk about how to just stand there with your shoulders back and head up and just the fundamentals, right?
Right.
So there's a little bit of that, and just making sure that between directors and staff, there's that level of communication when you're bringing people on with multiple experiences, which is what you want, that they understand how to apply those experiences. And to me, that's the first level of communication that needs to happen. Then after that, it's literally, what are you good at? Cool. What are you good at? Like, you want to use people in their assets of what their strengths are and understand their weaknesses, because maybe they don't need to be in front of small groups. Maybe they work really well in the full ensemble setting. Maybe they work really well in one-on-one lessons better than sectional. You don't know that until you kind of like get in there and kind of figure out how people operate.
Yeah.
So.
And you'll hear, if you're a director, you should be hearing that feedback from the kids too. How did the sectional go with this staff member? How was your private lesson? Do those check-ins. Make sure you kind of have your finger on the pulse there, and know how your staff members are doing, and talk to them, because you also don't want to miss out on gifts that they have either.
Well, that's the collaboration part.
Right.
They're going to come from a different level of experience, and they're going to want to implement that. And I think it's important that the director understands that level of experience and wants to involve them in that, and maybe it's a younger staff member that march drum corps that's getting into a band that already has a high level of expectation, and maybe they don't offer anything. They're just trying to make the cog and the wheel go round and round.
Sure.
And they're part of it. Or maybe they're a new staff member and there's the first staff member that the band director who's never had a staff, and now they're collaborating, and it could be a little more involved, I guess, in how to move the band program. So every situation is different, but I think it's important to understand where everybody's experience is.
Well, how about a very common scenario is, of course, what director doesn't want a few more staff members to help manage band camp or something, so what about the, we got a couple people who just graduated, they're coming back to help out a little bit, so their only experience is marching in your band for 4 years, but you're glad to have a couple extra people to help. How do you do that well?
That's a hard one.
And
the
I'll do
reason,
an asterisk. Maybe it's not the year they just graduated, but maybe it is, because I know that very next year
a lot
is
of it is, yeah, it's hard to do that, but it's a very common thing that happens.
It is,
and
right.
I think the biggest thing to do is find the student that was that has a trajectory of being an educator. Don't find one that's just trying to need some summer band money. You know what I'm saying? So I think finding that person so that you know that you can mentor them and it's coming or it's being accepted from a place that they know they need, I guess, for this information for the future and not just babysitting dollars for the summer, that's the first thing. But ultimately, sometimes band directors don't want to hear those kids' opinions. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, I'm not sure how much collaboration goes on in that.
No, probably way less. And that's kind of why I brought it up is when you have somebody like that coming in, it doesn't mean you can't utilize them in a useful way.
Oh, they're absolutely
But it takes a lot
useful.
more setting up expectations, talking about goals for this rehearsal, making sure behavior is going to be right.
Here's the deal. The thing that I've realized is when students get out from a member experience and they come to a teaching experience, whether it's high school or drum corps, it's literally the same mirror, right? Or experience of like, whoa, I didn't know all this stuff happens. Whoa, this was crazy on the backside. Whoa, I didn't know all these problems existed. Yeah, you were a member. You had no idea that
you weren't responsible for
all these problems and solutions were happening behind the scenes long before you got here. And then when you get here and you see it, doesn't mean that, everything's messed up. No, this is how things operate. Things are always going to be like this, and you're always problem solving, you're always planning, you're always doing this, and it might be a culture shock for some of them, And, and because they've always been hidden from it, you know. So it's like when you bring them into that world, you just have to make sure that there's a handbook somewhere for that.
Sure. But you really don't realize when you're a member, people do things for you. Like there's parents in the background working their butts off. There's staff members working their butts off for you. And then when you're a staff member, to all of a sudden be like, what?
Yeah.
Somebody needs their pants hemmed, or I have to run back to the school and grab that prop piece, or because someone always did that for you. So yes, you do need to do that.
Or a head broke at warm up and I got to run like 3 blocks over to the bus that moved from where it was.
In
and
your
they
dress
left me off.
shoes. Yeah, you better do it because we all did it too.
Yeah, exactly.
You already know.
It happened. So there's just, that's the value that they can bring sometimes.
It might be running across the parking lot to get heads right.
Yeah.
But that can be done correctly to bring on somebody young with not much of experience. But it takes some mentorship, some stewardship, very clear expectations and monitoring to make sure that they're learning first because it's a whole new thing to learn.
But you can also build a great staff around, like, especially rural country areas that, like, they're in a landlocked area. They're not going to get people to move in, so they have to develop their own staff. And I've seen plenty of bands that develop their own staff over the years, and those people's experience was only teaching that band, and they're great. They're awesome, So I don't think there's any wrong way of developing your program. You just have to make sure that you have the right people in there that you want to work with. And I think ultimately that's like probably end goal for every band director.
Right. And I mean, I guess if I were to generalize, I think if you're going to always have staff from your own program, you run the risk of some stale information getting passed behind by the culture, or whatever. But so make sure that
you always want outside information.
Open mind. Right. Exactly. You need other things coming into the nest, right? You need to. So
I mean, I'm always watching YouTube or TikToks and all the fun stuff where people are putting out like all the licks. Like, I want to learn. I want to see what's hip. I want to see all the cool little backsticking tricks that everybody's trying to do.
Yep.
And it's inspiring. I still keep up with what the kids are
fun is fun.
trying to keep it fresh. So I mean, you have to, right? I mean, that's what it is. And with that, I remember growing up and seeing drum guys come and go. And a lot of times, me looking back, I realized they were not willing to change, or they had a one-trick pony that they did, and it was like, oh, it's awesome. And then 5 years later, it wasn't so awesome anymore.
Yep.
So it's like with anything, and as we're talking about staffing, it's like your willingness to evolve, and if you don't, then holla, 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 done. So.
And then, the whole topic of keeping your staff and developing them,
Yeah.
right? You know, are you keeping your word? Are you paying people on time? Are you treating everyone fairly and being a courteous adult with each other? And, you know, hopefully having a good attitude as a leader and all those kind of things. I mean, that could be a whole podcast on its own talking about.
Yeah, I think I would fail miserably at some of those things. So, but I've grown from that. You know, it just it happens. But you know, we all learn, I guess, as we get older. So it's all good. So last thing before we get out of here, managing rehearsal burnout. Whew.
Yeah.
That's a thing. So, and to me, that comes from not having goals and not knowing where you're going to end up at the end of rehearsal or the end of the week or the end of the month. Once you find yourself going to rehearsal and just going through the motions, that's where that starts to happen, you know, and you don't know what to fix next, or you don't know the next thing, or maybe your problems are so vast you're crippled with decision making or just not know what to do. So, yeah.
Yeah. Sameness is the enemy, right? When it's just like the same old boring rehearsal, I'm going to spend the same amount of time, not get a different result out. If you can really get the students to internalize, it's like working out, right? Like you said, there's always a bit of athleticism here, but it works on the musical side too, whether it's their chops or their understanding. But you want to get them to embrace that, you know, the carrot's right in front of your nose and you're running and you feel the muscles burn a little bit and you know you got a little bit stronger today, and that's the win. If you can get them there, you've really done a good job to where like the workout is the reward of going to rehearsal. But there has to be that vision at the end. I mean, if you just told me to start digging a hole, I'm not going to be excited about it. If you tell me that we're digging a tunnel to a place, a whole different project.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yep. And with that, if you don't have that momentum and understanding and non-boredom during the week, going into a contest day or performance day might feel really weird. Like it'll feel really out of pocket from everything else because you've had this lull on rehearsals and all of a sudden, show day, let's get hyped. And it just is such a massive energy change that your show day, I guarantee you, will not be good. Mm-hmm. You know, because you haven't rehearsed that energy that you're getting ready to do in a consistent manner, right? So the whole point about rehearsing is clearly cleaning, doing whatever, like the normal things you need to produce your show, but ultimately maintaining a performance energy as much as possible so that is consistent when it's time for somebody to write numbers down and score you based off of what you're doing. Because, you know, we've all heard the joke, you know, put on your Superman suit, here you go, you get ready to do a show.
Right.
And, you know, when I was younger, I was like, yeah, let's do this. And then when I got older, you know, you start teaching, I was like, no, you're wearing the Superman suit every day.
Yeah.
Like, it's not just one day a week or every 2 weeks thing. Like, you have to wear this every time you put on that drum or walk into the band room, that kind of thing, which is, it's an interesting mentality to upkeep, but...
No, honestly, even as a member, nothing is worse than being told, like, you're about to go on the field for championships and they're trying to give you some kind of pep talk, and it's like, you guys, you got to believe it. We might pop a run. We might get it right. We might do it. You know, You should believe in synergy right now. Maybe we're all going to align forces and do it. Like, that is the most soul-crushing speech to get. You're like,
yeah, it didn't quite happen the way you wanted it to in rehearsal, huh? So
no, yeah, it's only going to be like you did in rehearsal. So can you build in scenarios for them to get in front of a rehearsal type energy? You know, can you, like, you know that every time the band rehearses, the soccer team is rehearsing right over there. Can you talk to the soccer coach and have them come over and watch the last 10 minutes of your rehearsal once you put the opener on? Can you get parents to come for a preview day or two or something? You know, like maybe there's parents who are hanging around the band field anyway. Get them up in the stands at the end, something, you know. Is there, you know, a certain benchmark that you already set out? You know, we're going to have the first two movements on by this time, and we're all going to watch the video together. You know, something that you're building up to so that there is a goal, right? Otherwise, why am I digging this hole?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, in the end, goals is what's going to keep you from burning out. And, you know, now that I say that, I look back on a lot of groups that felt like we were burnout, and I think that was clearly the lack of Lack of goals.
Okay,
And
but you need to share when you get the goal too, because sometimes the goal system is all just director and staff stuff, and the rehearsals, the members are just showing up to rehearsal every day and going home, and they don't know whether they did good or not. So I do think there needs to be that. Share it with them, like it can't just be stick, stick, stick for the members. There's got to be carrot, carrot, carrot too when you do good. So having specific, critical, commentary on how they're doing things at rehearsal, and then specific praise, super specific praise when they do things right. When you hit benchmarks, how are we going to lift them up?
Yeah. And as we get off here, one of the last things I want to talk about, because we kind of touched on it a little bit, and kind of end it. But when we end rehearsals, I think we don't need to keep the members longer than past the time. Like if your rehearsal ends at 8:30 and you're going to give a 10-minute speech about what's going to happen on Saturday at the band contest and logistics and whatever, then you need to end the rehearsal at 8:20 so that you can talk that. Because what happens is you end the rehearsal at 8:30 and you have your 10-minute discussion, and it takes them 10 minutes to walk down to the band field. Now the band parents are waiting around when they thought it was going to be 8:30. They assume, okay, 8:35, whatever, for my kid to walk back, but it's really now 8:50. Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
So I would, make sure that gets in everybody's vocabulary to make sure you end rehearsal at the right time. And
parents will turn on you if you don't do it. Like they will
you do it enough.
If you do, if you do
it enough,
but,
that kind of thing. It's not a good thing.
That's part of the promise you're making to them. You're going to
dump
your kid in here.
To me, if you're not doing that, it just means you didn't plan out your rehearsal well enough, and you're just running over time every single time. And to me, that's just always a planning issue.
Yep.
And ultimately, if you start letting your members out at the right time, they'll start showing up earlier. And you can start on time, because you could talk about, I want my time back at the end of rehearsal. You showed up late, what I'm saying? You could put it on the members, and it just works out for a better experience for everybody.
Yeah.
Because, band is a family thing, so you want to include them and not, don't forget that they're giving up their time to come pick up the kid. It's a whole thing.
Oh, yeah. It could be an hour for some parents, or more, just to come pick them up.
Yep. It's a whole thing. So just take into that account.
Right. And I think for a young staff member, as a director, when you have younger staff members, letting them know that that's one of the most important responsibilities. Everything you do in the middle, we can talk about. But you're going to do your wrap-up meeting at this time, and they're going to be in the parking lot for pickup at this time.
Absolutely, yeah. Those are sticklers you can put in there and
do
the whole thing. So.
Yeah.
That's good stuff.
Yeah, my favorite director I ever worked under used to pay the staff by checks at the end of each rehearsal, and that was how you knew everything was out on time, because you're walking into my office to either get this or not get this. So
yeah, that's funny.
That's right, handshake. Yep,
that's good stuff.
Yeah.
But.
Well, everybody, please sound off in the comments underneath this episode with any specific questions you have about rehearsal management. We'd love to have new things to think about ourselves, new things to discuss. And, we know a ton of people in the band world, whether who are working as single directors doing the whole show or directors with giant staffs and parent organizations. And I know there's a lot of wisdom we could tap into and share. If there's anything for your specific situation that we didn't get into, but we, scratch the surface of and you have more questions about, please let us know. We'd love to get you that information and kind of, make a more healthy discussion here.
Yeah, I'd love to get some folks on the podcast, get a little new faces that can give us some extra insights on what's out there. So there's always another situation that your situation would relate to with somebody out there, and we'd love to hear about it.
Yep. As a final sign-off, I'll just leave you with this. With your band season this year, do something worth remembering, all right? For the kids, for the audience. If you can't zoom out all the way and think that it was, worth remembering, then rethink some things.
Yep.
Right?
Absolutely.
All right, till next time.
Holla, holla.